First thing I want to go over is, one, I sent out the invite for Tuesday's lab because Monday filled already. So I sent Tuesday out to just this class. So if you think you can attend, please sign up before I send it out to the other students who tend to monopolize the labs. So, and then I'll send Wednesday out to you guys first also before I send it to the other students. All right, so we did some texturing with the rolling mill. So I have another method for texturing metal. It's actually etching. And it actually is a solution. It's a salt solution that you soak your metal in and actually bites into the surface. I don't know if you can see that so well on the screen. I'll bring these with me again next week so you can see them in person. But you can do like some very abstract patterns. This one is not etched yet. You can do some very precise patterns. You can use, I'll tell you what you can use. This is a very precise pattern. It was Xerox from a pattern book. So I don't know if you can see how the depth of that etch. So the background has been removed. The raised area was masked so that it would remain. You can pass them down. This solution works on copper and brass and nickel and bronze. It does not work on sterling. For sterling, we need an acid, and this is not an acid per se. So what you need is a design idea. You need a piece of metal, and then I have one set up. That's already etched. I have one that's set up with resist on it. Oh, they did. But what we use for resist, you can use a plain Sharpie pen that was working. Then I came across these Sharpie oil paint pens. They were working, and then we think maybe they changed their ingredients because they stopped working. And then I came across this. Where did I find this? In a hardware store in Newtown. Testor's pen. Enamel paint marker. And I've used this for etching, and it worked really, really well. So the first thing you would need to do is transfer your design to your metal. So how can you do that? Well, it depends what you're doing. For something like this that's abstract, I just drew onto the metal with the marker freehand. For something like this, actually it feels like it's been enameled. For something like this, more precise, I would say I probably placed a piece of carbon paper on the metal and then put my drawing on top of it and then traced the drawing, and it would transfer to the metal through the carbon paper. Then go over the transfer with the paint pen. You'll also have to do the edges of the metal so that the solution doesn't bite into the edges. And then we also will seal the back of the piece also, and then we'll soak it face down in the solution. I have the solution already made up. I thought I'm not going to take the time to do an actual demo. I'll just go over how to do this, and then when you're ready to do it, then I'll take the solution out and show everybody how to do it. Other things I tried, I think these were slices of electrical tape instead of the paint pen. Just kind of overlapped. This one was some kind of self-stick strips. They had a texture to them. They were almost like sandpaper. And I just bent them and curved them and made them adhere to the metal, and that kind of worked out. One of these, I don't know which one. Usually I'll mark the backs of these as to what I did, but not this time. Lithograph crayon. I had lithograph crayons left over from printmaking way back in art school. And because they were oil-based, they worked well too. So there's a lot of different things you can try. And if you do want to test things out, cut little pieces of metal and do your testing for your resist, see what will work and what won't. Oh, I think this one was hot glue. I just like squirted hot glue from a hot glue gun onto the metal. I like abstract things, so I'm not into like these precise patterns, but if you want the precise patterns, they come out really nice. And you probably can't see it on the screen, but the solution leaves a little bit of a texture in the background. Okay, so where you have the resist, the pen or the marker, that's the raised area. And then the bare metal gets etched away. So it's an interesting process. You can do a lot with it. This one was a failure, so I left it in too long. So it ate right through the bare copper. So that one didn't work out too well. I spent a lot of time transferring that pattern onto here too. I can remember I'm trying to think how I did this. I remember having it covered with that lamination plastic that you use. And I remember an X-Acto knife, and I was cutting pieces out. And then I did that. So that's what happens when you don't pay attention to things. All right, so etching. It's a fun process. Try it out. You can, you're probably better off if you want to texture something with this method. I would texture a piece larger than my pattern and etch that, and then cut whatever shape I'm going to cut for my design this way, just in case your edges do get etched away a little bit, it won't affect your design. That makes sense. Okay, that was short and sweet. All right, the next thing I want to go over is called pre-polishing. In that paperwork that I gave you the first class, of course I didn't take it out, I thought I did. There's a list called Steps in Fabrication. So it'll take you through step one, you know, your design idea, transfer your design to your metal. The next step is cutting out your shapes, filing your edges, doing your emerying. And then there's something called pre-polishing. So pre-polishing is done on the polishing machine. You can do this before you emery or after you emery, depending how scratched up the surface of your metal is. And it's done on the polishing machine. All right, so we're going to travel back to the polishing machine. Away we go. And first we're going to do a safety lecture while I adjust the iPad. Now you're too low. Maybe too close. All right, so this is the polishing machine. So safety, long hair must be pulled back. Very important. These spindles are what you're going to put your polishing buffs on. These turn at really high RPMs. And if you happen to lean in a little too close and your hair gets caught in there, it will rip the hair right out of your scalp. So long hair must be pulled back. Eye protection must be worn. If you're allergic to dust, Allergies, sinuses, you want to wear a dust mask. Oh, we have to wear them anyway. Duh. Okay, so you will have a dust mask on, that works. And the other thing I caution everybody about is if you're tired, don't get on this machine. The motor hums, it's boring work, it's very easy for your eyes to start feeling, it's almost like hypnotic. So if you're tired, do not polish. That's it for safety, I think. I'll probably think of something else. To power it on and off, and you guys on Zoom can't see this, it's down below this table on the right side. There's the on-off switch. That turns on the suction for the ventilation. So this has a vacuum, and back here there are openings that go down to the vacuum, take all the junk down into the cabinet. And it's loud, so I won't turn it on right now. This is the on-off switch for the motor. We have a slow speed on the left and a fast speed on the right. I don't think I've ever used the slow speed. And this will turn on the machine. The motor itself is not too noisy. It's that vacuum that's really noisy. Okay, this guy, you don't ever need to touch this. All right, now we also use polishing compounds with this machine. And we have several different ones that are that have different grits. So we're going to start out with the coarsest one. These are on a shelf next to the polishing machine on the floor on the left side. So the first one we're going to work with is called Tripoli. And each of the compounds are kept in these marked boxes because we don't want them to get mixed up. So Tripoli is the coarsest of the compounds we're going to use. This is great for removing scratches from your metal. It may also remove some excess solder. Depends how thick the excess solder is. So before you go to emerying excess solder off your pieces, you might want to try using some Tripoli on it. We have different size buffs, different types of buffs. We have some fluffy buffs, which are better for polishing. We have these hard felt buffs, which are good for removing scratches. And then there will always be a chunk of compound in the container too. And then there will be one of these guys that looks kind of weird. This is an inside ring buff for polishing the insides of rings. You'll also find several sizes of black bristle brushes. These are great for polishing textures, because when you polish metal, you're wearing the metal down. So if you polish a texture with a buff, you may wear down your texture. So you're better off polishing textures with the bristle brushes. Okay, now to put a buff on, goes on a spindle. You have to hold the other side because they'll turn together. And turn the buff toward, my arm out of the way, toward the rear until it's tight enough that it won't slide off the spindle. You want to make sure that the buffs are clean. I don't know if you can see this on the iPad, but this buff has like copper coating on it. So that I will want to clean off. Usually on the table there are these guys. These are called buff rakes. And once I turn the machine on, I can rake the buff and get a lot of that gunk out of the buff. I'll do that in a minute. Maybe I'll do it right now. Okay, before I do that, I will want to turn on the vacuum so it'll collect all this stuff. Before I do that, I want to tell you where the safety zone is on the buffs. It's between 3 and 4 o'clock. Closer to 4 o'clock is better. So if you picture the side of the buff as a clock face, so here's noon, here's 6, here's Thank you. And 9 over here. 4 o'clock is your safety zone. It's easy for these buffs to pull things out of your hands, especially if it catches edges of your metal. So 4 o'clock. That should be enough to clean it. All right, then when I'm ready to actually polish, I'll just do a little bit on this piece of metal. It's pretty dirty. You'll see how clean this gets. And what I will do is once I turn the machine on, then I'll do what's called dressing the buff. So while this is spinning, I'll apply some compound to the buff. And then I'll take the compound, I'll put it back in its container. Because if I lay it down on this table, it's going to pick up metal flakes, metal dust. And then the next time I dress the buff, those flakes will go onto the buff and then it'll scratch my metal rather than make it shiny and smooth. When I'm holding the metal, I want to hold it securely with 2 hands. And notice I support it with my index fingers behind. When I'm polishing, I'll be at 4 o'clock and I'll do a circular motion. If I go back and forth, I'll polish ruts into the metal. So use the circular motion. Now this is a large piece of metal, so I would go halfway and then turn it and do the other side and meet in the middle. On a smaller piece of metal, same thing, circular motion, work my way up. What I don't want to do is go right to this edge. This is where the buff could grab that edge and take this right out of your hand and throw it in the back of the machine. If you feel the buff pull, let go. Don't fight the buff. Just let it go. You don't want to get your fingers or your hands cut or hurt. All right, so let's start with a plain piece of sheet metal. I'm going to dress the buff, and you'll have to redress as you're polishing. Circular motion, 4 o'clock. And I'm just pushing into the buff gently, not real hard. The metal will get hot from the friction. If it gets too hot to hold, put it down. I can see a lot of copper on the buff. What I'm looking for, which I don't have yet, polishing is time consuming. I'm looking for a nice even shine on the metal, and I think it's hard to see on the iPad. I can see like some swirls on here, which is not what I want. So that means I have to continue adding some compound and polishing. This is nowhere near ready.
And then if you touch it to do the other side, is it gonna get?
I'll get fingerprints on it, which I can clean off easily.
Okay.
It's fine.
Are you still able to polish if you have sweat joints or?
Yes.
Oh, you can?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it would just be like a texture, we would use the bristle brush?
Yes. Okay, so let's say, all right, here's a, no, that's not excess solder. A lot of scratches. I want to do one with excess solder. Oh, this is good. I think it will get some of this out. I don't think it'll get these lumps out. The Triple E is coarse enough to remove some excess solder, but this has lumps. Not the center, but the 2 ends. It might smooth that out a little bit, but I don't think it'll remove it. but we'll try. And this is where you can see I'm going to be really careful about my edges. You might even want to hop to a smaller buff. And maybe I want to use one of those hard felt buffs. This one's small. Okay, so everything on. Rest the buff. Now this will heat up even faster because it's a smaller piece of metal. It's getting real hot. Oh my God, I didn't remove that. I didn't think it would take that long to solder off, but it did. It's gone. I'm shocked. I wasn't expecting that to happen. So it was getting really hot, so I would put it down, let it cool off, and then go back and do the other side. I would flip it around because I don't want my edges to get near the top. A little more compound. The other lump is being a little more stubborn. Yeah, that one's not going to come off. Close. Maybe if I worked it a little more, that would be gone too. Let's see. It's very close. It's still there a little bit. Not bad. So that hard buff will remove some solder traces, excess solder traces, and scratches. Now, so that was a butt solder, and I polished right over that, no problem. Now, if I want to polish a texture, I'm going to want to use the bristle brush. Now, the bristle brushes do not hold as much compound, so you have to dress the buff more often. All right, so I have this, looks like a rolling mill texture. Looks like I already started polishing it. At one point, I probably used this for a demo. So this would definitely wear down with the buff. The other end. And the brushes don't shine as much as the buffs do. You won't get as high a shine. So what you could do is start your polishing with the brush and then gently and lightly go over it with the loose buff. That's how shiny you want your metal. It's not all that shiny and it's clean. as shiny as the buff. So if I wanted a higher polish than that, I would go over it very lightly with the fluffy buff. So it's okay, but at least it doesn't wear the texture down like a buff would. All right, now, what do you have to watch out for? Things like sweat joints are fine, no problem polishing sweat joints. I can go right around that joint with a buff. It's really loose. Right over it. No problem. I can even use the edge of the buff to get right up to the edge of the solder joint. If I have like a little bit of excess solder there. Okay, not done, but it's on its way. Getting shiny. Now we have 2 more compounds after AAA that will take your pieces up to a really high shine if that's what you want. You can stop at any point in time, and your finish should relate to your design. So if I have a piece, I always use the example of an something that you want it to look like it just came out of an archaeological dig. I don't think you'd want to take it up to a really high polish. It wouldn't relate to your design. So, all right, here, this is a hazard. That can catch real easy. So I have options here. One, I should pre-polish these pieces before I solder them. And then if I'm really neat with my soldering, I'm good to go to the next step, whatever that is. Another option is to do this really carefully on the machine. Or another option is we have what's called a tumbler. And the tumbler is, it's that white plastic barrel that's sitting on top of that shelf. It's kind of upside down. I'll show you how to use it as you're working on your chains, because if you've been in lab, you may have seen some of the older students using it. We fill it with stainless steel shot. And as it rotates, it burnishes the metal. You get a really nice shine with it. It's safe to use. Your chains will go in there. You will never polish a chain on the machine. It is so dangerous. So I don't let anybody polish chains on here. Chains go to the tumbler. So when we have something to go in there, I'll show you how to assemble it and turn it on. But this guy, yeah, this is a real hazard. Do I even want to attempt to show you how? No, I don't. I don't feel like cutting my fingers. All right, when you're done, make sure you clean the buffs and put them back in their correct boxes. Now, there's one more step when you're polishing. These compounds are very greasy. So before you do anything else to your pieces, maybe you're going to solder something else onto them, whatever, you have to remove the excess polishing compound. So we're going to go over to the sink. What did I do? I just turned myself off. Okay, there we go. Over to the sink. You're going to make a mixture of Dawn dish liquid. This is great for grease. You've seen how they wash the oily ducks with Dawn dish liquid. Guess what? It's true. best stuff I've ever used for grease. And we keep ammonia in this spray bottle. It's labeled ammonia water. It's watered down a little bit. So what I do is I'll squirt some Dawn dish liquid in the sink. I'll then spray some ammonia on it. And then I want to take a soft brush. So one of the black washout brushes are soft. And if I was more towards the end of finishing my piece and I'm going up to a really high shine, I'd use like a really soft toothbrush so that I don't put scratches back onto the metal. Okay, so a little Dawn dish, oops, gotta open the bottle. Dish liquid, spray of ammonia. Mix it together with your brush and then gently scrub. And you will polish both sides of your metals. Backs must always look as good as the fronts. Wash that off.
That's after you polish or before?
After what?
After you polish or before?
That's after you clean.
Oh,
This cleaning is after you polish. Yes. I'm sorry, I wasn't understanding your question.
It's the ability to grease and stuff off.
And you can see it coming off. And what I like to do, I like to do my hands while I'm at it too. I can't stand walking around with polishing compound all over my hands. Now, when you rinse your metal, what you're looking for, and actually I should do the larger piece so you can see this. You might need to make more. I think I do. You'll want to see the water sheet right off of the metal. You shouldn't have any droplets of water sitting on the surface of the metal when you rinse. If I see any droplets, of water on the metal, what I will do is then, okay, so I have a few. If you can see them, yeah, I've had a few droplets. It's not too bad. I would mix more soap and ammonia, and I wash it again until none of that, no droplets. Then get rid of those. So droplets mean there's still grease on the metal. Couple. Some of that compound could be in the texture. This is especially important if you're going to solder what you just pre-polished, because remember, solder will not flow on dirty metal. All right, not done yet. Still have more scrubbing to do. I could be here for another 15 minutes scrubbing. So scrub, rinse until no more droplets. Let's see if I can get this on the sheet. Better. Put a smaller too. You can also, if you find that you can't get it all to sheet off, the other thing you can try is if you have rubbing alcohol somewhere in the studio, You can wipe your pieces off with rubbing alcohol. And somewhere in some jewelry publication, somebody said spit works too. I haven't tried it. Almost. So I'll show you how greasy those compounds are. Last couple of droplets just don't want to go away. All right, so more scrubbing. More scrubbing. All right, but I'm not going to make you stand here and watch me scrub until that sheet's off. You'll have your own experience with that when you pre-polish. I would encourage everybody to just take a piece of scrap metal and test out the polish solution before you polish your metals, just to get the feel of it, try it out. And which I forgot to show you how to polish a really small piece of metal. Same thing, just hold it carefully between your thumbs and your index fingers. If the buff hits your thumbs, it won't hurt. It might be hot, you might feel some heat, but it won't hurt you. So you can polish little tiny pieces, but if you really want to play it safe, put your little tiny pieces in the tumbler instead. Okay, now we're going back to my bench. I have one more thing I want to show you today. And this one is an FYI. It's not a requirement, but you might like to incorporate it into one of your projects. So I'm going to show you how to make a cuff bracelet today and a bangle bracelet. Next week we'll do rings, how to make rings. All right, so you can make cuff bracelets from sheet metal, well actually sheet metal. Usually the heavier gauge wires are for, is that silver? It is. The heavier gauge wires are usually for bangle bracelets. So for the standard length is 6 inches. So it's going to depend on the size of your wrist. If you have a small wrist, you may need to cut it down. A larger wrist, you might need another 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, beyond 6 inches. Possibilities. You can solder on top of the sheet metal before you form the cuff bracelet. You could do a rolling mill pattern and then form a cuff bracelet. Your edges can be shaped or they can be straight. I'm just going to form a straight one today for the demonstration. The width, totally up to you. Usually, the wider the cuff, you need to add a little bit of length onto it. So if you go over, say, 1.5 inches, up to 2 inches, up to 2.5 inches, you need to add maybe another 1/8 of an inch to the length. If you're just using plain sheet metal, all you need to do is anneal it, especially if you've done a rolling mill texture or a hammer texture on it. You could also etch a piece of sheet metal and then form it into a cuff bracelet. But before you form it, it must be annealed. I hope this is annealed. Okay, obviously silver is the best because it won't discolor your skin, but at the cost of silver right now, it's going to be a little pricey. 18 gauge is the best gauge for a cuff bracelet because they take a lot of abuse when they're being worn. If you wanted to solder, what doesn't work well are, should I call that a vertical butt joint? This way. Because when you put that cuff bracelet on and you take it off, it's flexing. So at some point, those solder joints will break. You could do a solder joint this way. I don't know why you want to, but if you did want to, for some reason, this way would work, but not this way. Okay? Now, what you need for a bangle bracelet is some heavy gauge wire. Why am I missing so many? I don't know. I'm going to say 12 gauge, 10 gauge, 8 gauge. 14's a little thin. So I would go in the range of 12 and thicker. These look like, that looks like 12. And that is round wire. Then you can also use square wire. Square wire makes a really nice bangle. And the standard size for a bangle is 8 inches. But as you get older and your hands get really beat up, you can't do 8 inches anymore. Can't even pick it up. Look at that little knot. That used to fit me. But no more. This one I soldered some little decorative elements onto it. I did that while the wire was flat. So if you want to solder on anything that's formed, you want to do that soldering while the piece is flat. So those are just little sweat solders of gold and silver chunks of stuff. All right, so we've got a heavy gauge wire. We have a piece of sheet for a cuff. The other thing you need is a bracelet mandrel. We have these two fairly new ones that are really nice. This one is for round, and it's got this tang that will go into a vise. This one is oval, and that's what we use for the cuff bracelets, an oval one, because your wrist is not round, it's oval, kind of. All right, so we're gonna take this, my metal. Do I see a hand offering to carry these for me? I have to take the iPad. I have to take the class with me. Okay, we're good. We're going to go back to the back of the, I don't need that one. We're going to go back to the back of the studio to the vise. Hang on. Try not to make you dizzy. Whoa, or drop the tripod. All right, I'm going to put this over here. This should work. And I just need, thank you. Excuse me, one sec. I just need that sheer thing out. This works really well for forming. Okay, can you see? All right, so the mandrel is going to go in the vise. You want to make sure that the tang is all the way in. And tighten it nice and tight. You don't want this to fall out on their toes. When you form a cuff bracelet, you're going to start at the largest part of the mandrel, which is the very bottom, and you're going to start forming the ends, and you'll flip it and form the other end, working towards the middle. And then you'll work your way up the mandrel, and every time I move up the mandrel, I'll flip the bracelet so that the sides stay straight, not angled. Okay, let me see how I can do this without getting in front of the iPad. I can do this. Flip and start the other end. Now, at some point, you should be able to grab those two ends and actually pull them around the mantle. That'll allow you to go back and kind of get the front formed. All right, so I've gone as far as I can at the bottom. I'm going to flip it and move up the mandrel a little bit. You always want to make sure that the front of your bracelet is centered on the front of the mandrel. Once you don't hit your finger. Okay, flip and move up. Move up. At some point, you'll want to stop and try it on. I'll probably go close to the top and then try it on. Sometimes they'll torque a little bit, which is what this one just did, meaning that my two ends are not exactly even. I can just manipulate that by hand, get a roll.
Will this
Push.
process affected if it's textured?
No.
No.
If you use this mallet, no. It's probably a good place to stop and try it on. I want to make sure the shape is nice. These ends look like they could go in maybe just a little bit more. They're kind of flared out a little bit. When you put a cuff bracelet on and you take it off, you should always do it from the side of your wrist. There we go. And before you try it on, you want to make sure that any corners, sharp edges, are filed. Round them out a little bit, otherwise you'll gash your wrist. Okay, that actually fits pretty good. It's not spinning. So I'm where I want to be, I guess, on that mandrel. I might want to just shape these ends a little better. Just a little bit of that flare out of them. And now if I want to polish this, these are also a little hazardous on the machine. I would go to the tumbler, because that would fit in there.
Could you polish it before
You could, and then it'll still need a touch up once you're done hammering it. A good thing to do is to polish, definitely polish the back, pre-polish the back before you form it, because that inside is really difficult to get to. So you should do that. That was a good question. Pre-polish and then form. Now, for the bangle, I'm going to go to the anvil that's back here. All right, I have to turn the class around. I'm going to use the horn of the anvil for this. And I'm going to start with the ends and work my way around. Right now, I'm not too concerned about this being round. What I am concerned about, if I'm going to solder this closed, I'm concerned about getting these two ends to butt together properly to solder. So start with the ends. Probably pull them around. Down. I can reshape this after it's soldered. All right, I might even be able to manipulate this by hand now. No, not really. I want to get those ends down a little bit. And I may just do that by tapping it with the mallet like so. Then, almost like a jump ring, I want to just kind of do it back and forth. At some point, that seam should snap together. But this seam is not good. It's got a big gap in it. So that needs more filing. Yeah, I'll never fill. Maybe I want to tap those ends down just a little more, see if that helps. Even though you file these ends straight before you form, they somehow never are straight once you get them around and get them to butt together. So it's better, but it's not good enough for soldering. So I would have to pull this open a little bit and get a flat file in there and file those edges until they butt together perfectly. Then I could solder it closed, and then I could put it on the round mandrel and reshape it and round it out. And then tumbler for polishing, not polishing machine. Okay, easy stuff, not too difficult, and you can make some really nice stuff with these methods. Any questions?
Is that how you make earrings?
The hoop earrings?
Yes. But you have to be more careful because they're not.
You're going to be using much thinner wire. We have smaller mandrels too that you can use to make hoops. So yeah, you can make hoop earrings. You can hang them on wires. You can get very creative with hoop earrings too. You can maybe not make a full circle, but leave an opening that would fit
Something.
your lobe, and you could put a post on one side that would go through. So you think about that, and you can use the shaped wires for that, like square wire or round wire or triangular wire. Look in the catalogs and see what you like. For that, that wouldn't be too expensive to use silver, or to buy silver for earrings, hoop earrings. All right, any questions from the peanut gallery? You're all muted, no?
None for me.
None for me.
Okay, I can repeat this next week if you guys need. I'll make sure I bring all the stuff with me from this week, so if you need refreshing next week, or you couldn't see it well enough this week on Zoom, and I'll post the video as soon as it's processed. Okay?
Yep, sounds good.
All right, well, you guys are done for today. Make sure you sign up for that lab, please, if you're going to attend. Only if you know you can attend. Okay?
Sounds
Check
good.
your messages.
All right.
All right, have a good week. I'll see you guys next week.
Have a good one.
Thanks.
You too.
All right, bye. It's so weird. Every time oh, great. Now my whole thing is going to be in the end of the video. That's where I get my whole hand in front of the camera.